Welcome to the Business Boys Podcast, your go to podcast for all things business. Today, as always, I will be joined by Hamza and William. So, in today's episode, we're diving deep into the heart of UK's new 5-point immigration policy set to be enforced from 2024. From the health and care worker visa restrictions to the increase in minimum salary thresholds for sponsored workers and sponsors of family visas, we will be exploring each point in detail. We'll also discuss the replacement of shortage occupation list with an immigration salary list and reforms of the graduate route, and the impact of these changes on existing visa holders. So join us as we unravel the complexities of these policies and their far-reaching impacts on workers, businesses, and the economy. Stay tuned for an enlightening discussion on the Business Boys podcast. Today, we're diving into the heart of UK's new 5-point immigration policy set to be enforced from 2024. This policy is a significant shift from UK's approach to immigration and is expected to have far-reaching impacts on the workforce, businesses, and the economy. Let's break these down into 5 points. So, the healthcare worker visa restrictions. UK has introduced health and care visa that allows medical professionals to come or stay in the UK to do an eligible job with the NHS, an NHS supplier, or in the adult social care. However, under the new changes, care workers and senior care workers will be unable to bring dependents when they migrate to the UK. The increase in minimum salary threshold for sponsored workers. So the minimum salary threshold for sponsored workers is set to increase. The skilled worker minimum salary threshold will increase from 26,200 to 38,700. Increase in minimum salary threshold for sponsors of family visas. The government is raising the minimum income for those bringing family members to the UK on a family visa to 38,700 from spring 2024. So, an estimated 70,000 people came into the UK on a family visa in the year ending June 2023. So, this is going to drastically reduce the net migration, in my opinion. And the next one is the immigration salary list to replace the shortage occupation list. The UK government is planning to replace the shortage occupation list with the immigration salary list. This means that instead of occupations being in shortage, the focus will be on the salaries associated with those occupations. So for those of our listeners who aren't aware about what the shortage occupation list is, it is a catalogue of jobs that are in high demand in the UK. So basically, if a job is on this list, it means that there aren't enough resident workers to fill available positions in that particular occupation. And the last point we're going to be discussing is the impacts on existing visa holders. The new immigration rules are expected to impact existing visa holders. For instance, overseas students will be stopped from switching from the student visa route to work visa routes until their studies have been completed. These changes are expected to have profound impacts on the workforce. So let's see the reasonings behind some of these changes and what are the public's initial reactions to this. The main reason that prompted the introduction of these policies is to attain the government's goal to reduce net migration. So there are potential economic benefits associated with migration, especially to fill in the gaps in the UK labour market, where there are shortages of workers, whether high or low skilled. But upon enforcing these policies, research suggests that any adverse wage effects on immigration are likely to be greatest for the resident workers who are themselves migrants. This is because the skills of new migrants are likely to be closer substitutes for the skills of migrants already employed in the UK than those of UK-born workers. But despite the significant wealth of contradictory evidence, public perception of the impacts of immigration on the labour market outcomes seem to be largely negative. So, in my opinion, the labour sector that is most affected by these policies is the care sector. So, just to get some background, the demand for labour in UK's care sector has been experiencing significant changes. Here are some trends and how the new immigration policies might affect them. So the adult social care sector had a vacancy rate of 8.2%. That's more than twice the UK average. The sector is facing a shortage of 105,000 workers. The number of care workers in England fell for the first time, and the number of empty care jobs rose by 52% in a year. Higher care fees are expected to boost the industry's average profit margin in the long run, while the growing labor expenses are expected to limit the profit margins in the medium term. So, what are the impacts of the new immigration policies on the sector? The new immigration policies are expected to impact the care sector significantly because the minimum salary for a skilled worker visa will rise from the current level. And this is expected to impact around 35% of all 2022 visa holders. Social care workers, care assistants, home care workers are to become eligible for health and care visa for a 12-month period. The government said this will make it easier to fill in the gaps in the workforce. But however, under the new system, foreign nationals applying to work in the UK care sector seem certain to fall well short of the 70 points that is required. Care work is not classed as a shortage occupation, and even though 1 in 11 posts is currently unfilled. Now, another important issue I wanted to talk about is the dependent visa, which again affects the sector. So, from January 2024, international students studying in the UK will no longer be able to bring in dependents with them on their student visa, aside from those on research and postgraduate programs. Only overseas students on courses designated as research programs, such as PhD students or research-led master's courses, will be able to bring in dependents with them under the new rules to curb net migration. So, again, these changes are expected to have profound impacts. So, let's explore how they affect the businesses in our economy.
So, the big question is, how is this policy going to affect UK businesses and the labor force as well? Because obviously they're connected. So if we look at this source, both businesses and trade unions attack the measures and call it counterproductive for the private sector, and especially the state-run health service, which are both faced with labor shortages. Essentially what this means is that because of the minimum salaries that were imposed, most people are forced to leave, because they have no other choice. And so this puts more pressure for businesses in terms of having to get more workers because of the shortages. According to some statistics by Reuters from an article published in December 4, 2023, it is said that figures from last month showed a record of 745,000 annual net migration from 2022 until more recently. So this is just a bit of some statistics, background statistics on net migration, with specific emphasis on migrants from India, Nigeria, and China rather than the EU. So surprisingly, it's actually more, we see more migrants from India, Nigeria, and China. As you can see, this graph shows how many immigrants come and from which country they come from. This shows kind of 2016 to 2022 levels. So it doesn't really show the 2023, but we can kind of estimate where it could be. In this graph, we can see the long-term immigration by nationality and reason. So we see that this is for the year ending June 2022. So this is just it is a year old, but we can see that for non-EU immigrants, 151,000 of those have a reason to work, and around 277,000 of those have the reason studying. So once again, as you can see from the bar graphs, the non-EU nationals usually have a bigger section. So once again, by increasing the minimum salary would most likely cut this. And we'll talk about this. Home Secretary James cleverly said that the government would raise the minimum salary threshold for foreign skilled workers to £38,000 or $48,900 from the current £26,200, exempting health and social workers. However, if we shift our focus over to the policy itself and what happens to businesses and the labor market, well, these measures could would most likely spark disputes with business owners who have already struggled to hire workers in recent years after Britain already tightened its labor market and the end of free movement from the EU since Brexit. But it's interesting to see that obviously Brexit was, leaving the EU, but we're now looking at non-EU nationals being the majority of the immigrants, with them taking high percentage of work reasons. So cleverly said, and I quote, "We will stop immigration undercutting the salaries of British workers, and we will create a new immigration salary list with a reduced number of occupations." So, however, studies have shown that foreign workers, in fact, have little to no effect or impact on the overall wage or employment levels. So, kind of contradictory here. But it is also said that businesses will suffer from the shrinking of talent pools. Another source says that many employers value the ability to hire workers from overseas because of the knowledge and skills they contribute to the business. And another reason includes performing specialist jobs in areas where the UK is lacking skills. So, yeah, I just think it's mostly about diversity at this point, It's just like bringing people with different minds and allowing them to have their own share, kind of like in the decisions that the business takes. I think that is important. So, by simply, having these policies will most likely reduce that diversity and possibly have negative effects on the business performance. However, other people call for a better fit for purpose immigration system that reflects and takes into account the needs of businesses and the labor market. The Bank of England, on the other hand, said that it found it easier to hire, as you mentioned earlier, but it is important to bear in mind that skills shortages still remain an important issue in other sectors. And to put the cherry on the cake, someone else said, and I quote, "Migrants will now head to more welcoming countries rather than be forced to live without their families," which is harsh to say, but I guess it's true. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Hamza. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. There's so many positive or negative effects that could come from this. And let's take a little look at what some of the economic impact of the net migration bill could be. Currently, Statista shows that in Q4 2022, net migrations for non-EU citizens, the grey line, hit around 620,000. A slight economic issue, however, is that a large percentage of these net migrations are dependents. For example, dependents can be your partner, wife, child, and it makes sense that workers want to bring their families and loved ones. However, it's evident that the total number of non-EU migration to the UK, workers, the turquoise line, makes up a relatively small chunk of the total migration, it's at around 200,000. Furthermore, Home Office Media estimates that only 25% of dependents work when they come to the UK. Looking to the larger picture then, when we consider that the UK population currently sits at 67.33 million, and that the number of people employed sits at 32.8 million, the percentage of able-bodied workers in the UK relative to total population sits at around 48.7%. This means that these net migrations could be pulling the UK average of able-bodied workers down, potentially placing more strain on the economy. This could be why the minimum salary for skilled workers rose from 26,200 to 38,700. The Home Office has stated that anyone bringing dependents to live in the UK must be able to financially support them. This higher wage should mean that any workers wanting to migrate to the UK and bring their families should pay a higher tax bill, thus relieving pressure on the government and the economy. It's important to remember, though, that although some migrations don't contribute to the worker statistic, these migrations can still have a positive influence on the economy. Universities, for example, attract high fees from international students, with the average fee sitting at around £22,200. These are much higher than the UK fees of £9,250. We can see, looking again at figure 3, 350,000 students in 2022 Q4 were in the UK, which would generate £7.7 billion of income for universities. There would also be large additions to the economy with the student cost of living. And although it's currently unclear what final salary these new students will have once they graduate, and will fall under in terms of the £38,700 rule, as this salary is more for dependent workers, and this effect comes into play in 2024, as long as the workers staying in the UK are of a higher quality this should have a net positive effect through taxes and additional effects.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that this policy was specifically targeted for people who are working in the UK. And it seems that, according to your graph, and this actually represents everything really well, people who come study to the UK actually forms a larger number. And so I don't really get the point of the policy of targeting workers specifically. But I agree with the fact that, family immigrants should support their, is
The
it?
dependents.
Yeah, their dependents
Dependents,
financially, yeah. I definitely agree with that point.
Yeah, I also agree with some parts of enacting the policy where you need to kind of reduce net migration because it's been shooting up a lot lately. But I don't really agree with the methods or how they went about it.
Yeah, I feel like to some extent, I think, maybe everyone agrees with the policy, but I think that maybe it should have been implemented, as you said, in a different way and worded differently, because I feel like it was.
I think when we see the 38,700, and it's like specifically targeted at families, that's like a feeling point, isn't it? Everyone's emotions go, oh, that feels wrong. And maybe the government could have put it across in a nicer way, or.
Yeah, I mean, we can see that most of the top occupations receiving their visas over the past year or so would not be heavily affected by the higher salary threshold, although some people towards the bottom of the salary distribution in these jobs would be. So the main impact of the increase would fall mainly on middle-skilled jobs such as butchers and chefs, where workers tend to earn salaries of around 26,000, which is the level of the previously established threshold. So as you can see, this graph really shows where the new salary threshold will lie in and how many visas were granted to specific occupations. And it looks like, those that are above will not be affected, but the ones that are below are, and it's mainly targeted towards middle.
That's a really good graph, actually.
Skilled jobs.
Showing the professions.
So thank you for listening to the Business Boys podcast today, and hope you've got some interesting insights on the new immigration policies. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon. So until next week, see you.